chlorine-scented air of the community pool usually offered a blessedly anonymous escape, a brief respite from the crushing weight of my position, a place where I was just Eleanor, another resident seeking solace from the summer heat. That illusion, along with the tranquil turquoise surface of the water, shattered in an instant of pure, unadulterated horror. One moment, I was idly watching a small boy, no older than 7 or 8, his face alight with pure joy as he splashed near the shallow end steps, his bright orange swim ring a cheerful beacon. His mother, a young woman with tired but loving eyes, sat on the edge, her feet dangling in the water, encouraging him softly in Spanish. The next, a shadow fell over them both, literally and figuratively. Brenda Hoskins, a woman whose self-appointed role as the pool's unofficial commandant was well known and generally tolerated with eye rolls and sighs, descended upon them like a hawk. I'd seen her type before in every neighborhood, every organization. The petty tyrant, who thrived on enforcing arbitrary rules, her voice a perpetual instrument of disapproval. Today, however, her usual officiousness curdled into something far more malevolent. This is the adult swim lane. Brenda's voice, sharp and grating, sliced through the afternoon calm, though they were nowhere near the roped-off lap lanes. And that thing she gestured dismissively at the boys' swim ring is not permitted. It's a hazard. The mother, Maria, looked up, startled. "Pardon, he is just here by the steps. He is not bothering anyone." She had a slight accent, her English careful. The boy Leo, sensing the tension, stilled his splashing, his joyful expression, dimming into confusion. I noticed then the slight almond shape of his eyes, the endearing way his tongue peeked out when he concentrated, hallmarks that often accompanied Down syndrome. He was, by any definition, a child simply enjoying a pool. "Rules are rules." Brenda snapped, her face hardening. "And furthermore, his noise, it's disruptive. People are trying to relax." She gestured vaguely towards a couple of sunbathers several yards away, who appeared entirely unperturbed, lost in their books. My hand, halfway to applying sunscreen, froze. A familiar unease, the precursor to righteous anger, began to simmer within me. Eleanor Vance, Attorney General for the state, had seen enough discrimination, enough casual cruelty to recognize its insidious beginnings. Maria pulled Leo closer. "He is just being a boy, Senora. He is happy." "Happiness has its limits," Brenda retorted, her voice rising. "And so does my patience. If you can't control him, then you need to take him out of the pool. This area is not for his kind of play." His kind of play. The words hung in the air, ugly and loaded. Maria stood up, her small frame tensing. "My son has every right to be here. We pay our HOA dues just like you." "Rights." Brenda scoffed, taking a step closer, her posture aggressive. "Some people have more responsibilities than rights, and one of them is not inflicting their problems on everyone else." It happened so fast. Brenda reached out, not for Maria but for Leo. She grabbed his arm, her fingers digging into his skin. Leo cried out, a sound of fear and pain. Maria lunged forward. "No, do not touch him." But Brenda was quicker, stronger, her face contorted in an expression of malicious resolve. She yanked Leo towards her, and then with a horrifying, deliberate motion, she pushed him under the water, holding him down with both hands on his small shoulders. Leo's bright orange swim ring popped off and bobbed uselessly on the surface. His little legs thrashed for a second, then went still. Bubbles, desperate and frantic, rose to the surface. Time seemed to stop. The cheerful chatter around the pool faded into a roaring in my ears. For a horrifying fraction of a second, I was paralyzed by disbelief. Then the training, the instinct, the sheer unadulterated fury of a protector witnessing an atrocity kicked in. I was moving before I consciously registered the decision. I launched myself from my lounge chair, covering the few feet to the pool's edge in 2 strides, my sunglasses flying off. "Get your hands off him!" I roared, my voice a command, not a request. The voice I used in courtrooms in hostile negotiations, the voice that made hardened criminals and evasive politicians quail. I vaulted into the shallow end, the water shockingly cold against my heated skin. Brenda, startled by my sudden appearance and the force of my voice, momentarily loosened her grip. It was enough. I shoved her hard, sending her stumbling back against the pool wall, her eyes wide with shock and outrage at being challenged. In the same motion, I scooped Leo up from under the water. He was limp, his face a terrifying shade of blue, his eyes closed. Water streamed from his mouth and nose. Maria was screaming a raw, animalistic sound of pure terror trying to reach him. "Call 911. I yelled at the stunned lifeguard, a teenager who looked utterly overwhelmed, his whistle dangling uselessly. Now, I laid Leo on the hot concrete beside the pool, tilting his head back, checking his airway. He wasn't breathing. My mind raced years of emergency response training, long dormant, but never forgotten, flooding back. 1, 2, 3, 4, check for breath. Nothing. I pinched his nose, covered his small mouth with mine, and breathed. Once. Twice. His chest rose. I repositioned my hands for chest compressions, the smallness of his ribcage, a stark reminder of his vulnerability. "He's breathing," Maria sobbed, dropping to her knees beside me, her hands fluttering over Leo, afraid to touch him. Indeed, a small ragged cough escaped Leo's lips, followed by a weak cry as he expelled a gush of chlorinated water. Color faint but blessedly present began to return to his cheeks. He coughed again, his eyes fluttering open, dazed and terrified, seeking his mother. Maria gathered him into her arms, rocking him, murmuring frantic reassurances, in Spanish, tears streaming down her face. Only then did I turn my full attention to Brenda Hoskins, who was now sputtering indignant. "How dare you assault me? That boy was out of control. He was a menace. I was merely restoring order." I rose slowly to my feet, water dripping from my sundress, my hands clenched into fists. The adrenaline was still coursing through me, but a cold, precise anger was taking its place. Restoring order, I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "You forcibly submerged a disabled child. You held him underwater until he lost consciousness. You nearly drowned him. He splashed me." He was being aggressive. Brenda insisted, her voice shrill, though her eyes held a flicker of something. Not remorse, but perhaps a dawning awareness that she had crossed a line from which there might be no easy return. The other pool-goers were staring horrified, some now advancing their earlier apathy replaced by shock and anger. "I saw what happened, Mrs. Hoskins," I said, my voice like ice. "Everyone here saw what happened. You initiated the confrontation. You assaulted that child. And you did it because he's different, because you decided he didn't belong." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The lifeguard was finally on his phone, his voice trembling as he relayed information. Brenda drew herself up, a caricature of affronted dignity. "And who are you exactly to make such accusations? Some busybody?" I met her gaze, and for the first time that afternoon, I allowed the full weight of my authority, the authority she had no inkling of, to settle into my demeanor. "My name is Eleanor Vance," I said, my voice clear and carrying in the sudden hush that fell as the sirens grew louder. "I'm a resident here. I'm also the Attorney General for this state. And Mrs. Hoskins, you are in a great deal of trouble." The flicker in her eyes wasn't fear yet. It was disbelief, a momentary confusion, as if she hadn't quite processed the words. But as two police officers strode purposefully through the pool gate, their expressions grim as they took in the scene. Maria clutching a still-sobbing Leo, me, standing soaked and resolute, Brenda looking increasingly flustered. A different kind of understanding began to dawn on her face. The kind that knew the rules, her rules, had just been irrevocably, spectacularly broken by a power far greater than her own. The attempted murder of a child, witnessed by the state's chief law enforcement officer, was not something that could be smoothed over with an HOA complaint or a condescending lecture. This was real, and the consequences would be severe. The arrival of the police brought a semblance of procedural order to the chaos, though the underlying tension remained thick enough to cut with a knife. Leo, wrapped in a towel, was being examined by paramedics, who had arrived with the officers, his frightened whimpers a constant heartbreaking soundtrack. Maria, never leaving his side, answered their questions in a low, trembling voice, her eyes darting between her son and Brenda Hoskins, who was now being questioned by one of the officers, her initial bluster deflating into a mixture of indignation and a dawning, albeit reluctant, comprehension of her predicament. I gave my statement to the other officer, a calm, professional woman named Officer Miller. I recounted everything I had seen and heard, from Brenda's initial aggressive confrontation to the horrifying moment she held Leo underwater. I was careful to stick to the facts, to the observable actions, though the outrage still burned fiercely within me. When I identified myself as the Attorney General officer, Miller's pen paused mid-stroke. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly before her professional mask slipped back into place. "Yes, ma'am," she said, her tone respectful, but appropriately neutral. "We'll need a formal written statement from you as well at your convenience." "Of course, officer," I replied. "My office will cooperate fully. I want to be clear, I am a witness to a violent assault, potentially an attempted homicide, and a clear violation of this child's civil rights based on his disability." Brenda Hoskins, overhearing this from a few feet away, let out a squawk of protest. "Attempted homicide, civil rights? That's insane. He was a disruption. I have rights too. The right to a peaceful environment." The officer questioning her, a stern-faced man named Sergeant Davies, turned a cold gaze on her. "Ma'am, right now, your primary right is to remain silent. I suggest you exercise it until you have legal representation." His tone left no room for argument. Brenda's face, which had cycled through shades of red and white, finally settled on a mottled puce. She looked around at the ring of silent, accusing faces, her neighbors, the people she had sought to dominate, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine fear, not just indignation, entered her eyes. The kind of fear that realizes the safety net of presumed social standing and entitlement has just been yanked away. After Leo was cleared by the paramedics, physically unharmed apart from the trauma and the terrifying experience, a miracle in itself, Maria prepared to take him home. She approached me, her eyes still shadowed with fear, but also holding a new fragile gratitude. "Senora Vance," she said, her voice thick with emotion, clutching Leo's small hand tightly. "Thank you. You saved my Leo. I don't know how—" "There's no need for thanks, Maria," I said, gently placing a hand on her arm. "Any decent person would have done the same. I'm just glad Leo is okay." I gave her my private contact card. "Please call me if you need anything at all, and know that my office will be pursuing this to the fullest extent of the law. What happened here today was not just an assault, it was an act of hate, and it will not be tolerated." Maria nodded, tears welling again, but this time they seemed to be tears of relief as much as sorrow. "Gracias," she whispered, before leading a subdued Leo away from the scene of his trauma. As they left, I watched Brenda Hoskins being formally arrested, read her Miranda rights, and placed in the back of a police cruiser. The satisfying click of handcuffs was a small punctuation mark on a horrific afternoon. She looked out the window, her face a mask of disbelief, still unable, it seemed, to comprehend the magnitude of what she had done, or the consequences that were now irrevocably in motion. She, Brenda Hoskins, pillar of the community in her own mind, enforcer of rules, was being treated like a common criminal. The irony was not lost on me. The following days were a whirlwind. My office, the Office of the Attorney General, was officially recused from directly prosecuting the case against Brenda Hoskins due to my status as a key witness. The case was handed over to the County District Attorney's Office, a team I trusted implicitly, led by a sharp, experienced prosecutor named David Chen. However, my involvement was far from over. I provided a detailed sworn affidavit. My Civil Rights Division also opened a parallel investigation into potential patterns of discrimination within the Harmony Creek HOA, triggered by Brenda's comments and the seeming passivity of other residents and the lifeguard during the initial confrontation. My usual life, a demanding ballet of managing a statewide legal office, advising the governor, appearing in court for critical state cases, and dealing with the political intricacies of my elected position, now had this intensely personal case woven through it. Harmony Creek, the quiet, suburban development where I had bought a small townhouse seeking a modicum of anonymity and peace, was suddenly under a microscope. The pool, once my sanctuary, was now a crime scene, cordoned off with yellow tape for a time while investigators gathered further evidence. The initial charges against Brenda Hoskins were aggravated assault and child endangerment. Bail was set high, but she managed to post it, engaging a high-powered, notoriously aggressive defense attorney named Marcus Thorne, known for his scorched earth tactics. And just as I had anticipated, Thorne's first move was to go on the offensive, not in the courtroom, but in the court of public opinion, and directly within Harmony Creek. This was the first shocking escalation in the aftermath of the pool attack. Brenda, through Thorne, began to wage a vicious smear campaign. Suddenly, anonymous flyers appeared on lampposts and in mailboxes around Harmony Creek, painting Maria as an irresponsible mother and Leo as an uncontrolled aggressive child who had provoked Brenda. They claimed Brenda was the true victim, a concerned resident who had been unjustly vilified for trying to enforce community safety rules. The language was coded, but the implications were clear. Leo's disability made him a nuisance, a threat, and Brenda's actions, while perhaps overzealous, were fundamentally justified. Some residents, those already predisposed to Brenda's brand of exclusionary thinking or perhaps intimidated by her and her lawyer, began to murmur in agreement. The Harmony Creek online forum, usually filled with banal discussions about lawn care and lost pets, became a battleground. Brenda was just trying to keep order. That child needs more supervision. Why is the Attorney General getting involved in a neighborhood squabble? The victim blaming was insidious, designed to erode support for Maria and Leo and to discredit me as a witness. Maria was distraught. She showed me one of the flyers, her hands shaking. They are saying Leo is bad, Senora Vance, that it is my fault. She was a single mother working 2 cleaning jobs to make ends meet, her life already a daily struggle. This public shaming, this attack on her child and her parenting was a fresh wound. This is a common tactic, Maria, I told her, my voice tighter than I intended, the injustice of it stoking my anger anew. They are trying to intimidate you to muddy the waters. Do not let them. The truth is on our side. I assured her that my office's victim advocates would support her and that we would counter these lies with facts. The second shocking incident followed swiftly. Maria's small patio garden, her one source of pride and relaxation, was vandalized. Her tomato plants were uprooted, her flowers trampled, and cruel words targeting Leo's disability were scrawled in what looked like shaving cream on her sliding glass door. It was a clear act of intimidation, designed to terrorize her into silence, to make her feel unwelcome and unsafe in her own home. The police investigated, but with no direct witnesses, it was difficult to definitively link it to Brenda or her allies, though the timing and nature of the vandalism left little doubt in anyone's mind as to its source. Brenda Hoskins. It was clear, felt emboldened, not chastened by her release on bail. She seemed to believe that with Marcus Thorne's aggressive defense, she could bully her way out of trouble, just as she had always bullied her way through life. She underestimated Maria's quiet resilience, and she grossly underestimated me. If she thought these tactics would make me back down, she was sorely mistaken. They only strengthened my resolve. This was no longer just about a single horrific act at the pool. It was about a pattern of behavior, a culture of intolerance that Brenda Hoskins embodied and actively promoted, and I was determined to dismantle it piece by piece. The parallel investigation by my Civil Rights Division began to unearth unsettling patterns within the Harmony Creek HOA. We issued subpoenas for records for minutes of HOA board meetings, for correspondence related to community rules and enforcement. What we started to find was a history of subtly discriminatory practices, often spearheaded or heavily influenced by Brenda Hoskins, who it turned out chaired the powerful Architectural and Community Standards Committee. This was the midpoint twist, the discovery that shifted the case from a singular, albeit horrific, assault into something far more systemic. Leaked emails and internal memos provided by a courageous anonymous whistleblower from within the HOA board itself, someone who had long been troubled by Brenda's iron-fisted rule but had been too intimidated to speak out until now, painted a damning picture. There were discussions about how to discourage families with too many children or children with special needs from moving into Harmony Creek. There were proposed rule changes couched in neutral-sounding language about maintaining aesthetic harmony or ensuring quiet enjoyment for all residents that disproportionately affected disabled individuals or minority families. For instance, there was a protracted debate heavily pushed by Brenda to severely restrict the types of play equipment allowed in yards, effectively banning adaptive swings or sensory play structures. There was another proposal to limit the hours children could use the community pool, specifically targeting times when working parents like Maria would be most likely to bring them. Many of these proposals hadn't passed, but the intent, the discriminatory animus, was clearly documented. Brenda's actions against Leo were not an isolated outburst. They were the violent culmination of a long simmering prejudice and a systematic effort to create an exclusionary environment. The whistleblower. A quiet accountant named Mr. Abernathy, who had served as the HOA treasurer for years, finally came forward to my investigators, his conscience apparently overriding his fear. He provided meticulously kept records, notes from closed-door committee meetings where Brenda's unfiltered bigotry was on full display. He recounted how she had bragged about keeping property values high by keeping certain elements out. He described how she would manipulate meeting agendas and bully dissenting board members into silence. She always said she was protecting our investment. Mr. Abernathy told my chief investigator, his voice trembling slightly, but it felt wrong. What she did to that little boy, that was the final straw. I couldn't stay silent any longer. This new evidence was explosive. David Chen, the county DA, immediately moved to amend the charges against Brenda Hoskins, adding multiple counts of civil rights violations under state law to the existing charges of attempted murder and aggravated assault. Marcus Thorne, Brenda's lawyer, tried to block the new charges, arguing they were retaliatory and irrelevant to the pool incident. But the judge, after reviewing the preliminary evidence provided by Mr. Abernathy and my office's investigators, allowed the charges to stand. The scope of the case had just widened considerably. Brenda Hoskins wasn't just on trial for trying to drown a child. She was on trial for a pattern of calculated malicious discrimination. The trial of Brenda Hoskins became the most talked about legal battle in the state. The presence of the Attorney General as a primary witness, the horrific nature of the crime against a disabled child, and the added dimension of systemic civil rights abuses by an HOA committee chair created a media firestorm. National news outlets descended on our county courthouse. The small community of Harmony Creek was thrust into an unwelcome spotlight, its carefully constructed facade of suburban tranquility ripped away to reveal the ugliness festering beneath. The courtroom was packed every day. I sat in the gallery for much of the initial proceedings, a silent observer, until it was my turn to testify. Watching Marcus Thorne attempt to spin his narrative was an exercise in controlled fury. He portrayed Brenda as a civic-minded retiree, a stickler for rules perhaps, but certainly not a monster. He painted Maria as negligent, Leo as difficult. The entire incident a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by an overzealous attorney general with a political agenda. His attempts to discredit Mr. Abernathy were particularly vicious, trying to paint him as a disgruntled, unreliable employee. But David Chen was brilliant. Calmly, methodically, he built his case brick by brick. He started with the pool incident. The lifeguard, visibly shaken but resolute, testified about Brenda's aggression, her deliberate actions. Other pool-goers, their consciences stirred, recounted what they had seen, their initial reluctance overcome by the gravity of the situation. Paramedics described Leo's condition, the life-threatening nature of oxygen deprivation. Then it was Maria's turn. She spoke softly, her voice often breaking with emotion, but her testimony was powerful. She described Leo's love for the water, his innocence, the terror of watching Brenda hold him under. She spoke of the flyers, the vandalism, the fear she now lived with. Thorne's cross-examination was brutal, trying to trip her up to insinuate she was exaggerating, seeking sympathy or financial gain. But Maria held her ground, her love for her son a palpable force in the courtroom. "My Leo," she said, her eyes flashing at Thorne, "is a good boy. He is kind. He did nothing wrong. That woman, she tried to kill him because he is different, because she did not want him there." My testimony was the one everyone was waiting for. As I took the stand, I could feel Brenda Hoskins's eyes burning into me. Her expression was a mixture of hatred and a strange, almost bewildered resentment, as if I were personally responsible for her downfall, simply by existing, by witnessing her crime. I recounted the events of that afternoon, precisely as I remembered them, my voice, clear and steady. I described the look on Brenda's face as she held Leo under the chilling deliberateness of her actions. Thorne came at me hard on cross-examination. Ms. Vance, he began his tone, dripping with insinuation. Isn't it true that you have a well-known political agenda championing so-called vulnerable populations? Isn't it possible that you saw this incident as an opportunity to further that agenda to make an example of Mrs. Hoskins? Mr. Thorne. I replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. My agenda, as you call it, is to uphold the laws of this state and to protect its citizens, all of them. What I saw at that pool was not an opportunity. It was a crime. A child was nearly murdered in cold blood. My actions were those of any citizen obligated to intervene, and subsequently those of a witness cooperating with law enforcement. My position as Attorney General is incidental to the facts of what I saw, though it certainly informs my understanding of the civil rights violations involved. I went on to detail Brenda's comments, her use of phrases like his kind of play, and inflicting their problems on everyone else, making it clear that her actions were motivated by discriminatory animus against Leo's disability. The evidence from Mr. Abernathy and the HOA records was presented next, detailing the pattern of discrimination. Emails were shown on courtroom screens, minutes from meetings where Brenda argued for exclusionary rules. David Chen masterfully connected the dots, showing that the pool incident was not an aberration, but the violent manifestation of Brenda's long-held prejudices and her abuse of power within the HOA. The climax of the trial for me was not my own testimony, but the moment David Chen, in his closing argument, replayed a short, grainy cell phone video. It had been taken by another teenager at the pool, someone who had started filming when Brenda first began accosting Maria. The video was shaky, the audio distorted by background noise, but it captured the critical seconds, Brenda grabbing Leo, forcing him under her face, a mask of grim determination. It showed me lunging into the water, shoving her away, pulling Leo's limp body to the surface. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Jurors leaned forward, their faces etched with horror. Brenda Hoskins herself flinched, turning away from the screen, unable to watch the visual evidence of her own brutality. Attempted murder. David Chen said, his voice ringing with conviction as he turned to the jury. A deliberate act driven by hatred and a sense of entitlement, and a clear, undeniable violation of a child's civil rights, part of a pattern of seeking to exclude and marginalize those deemed different. Brenda Hoskins believed she was above the law, that her rules were the only ones that mattered. Today you have the power to show her and everyone who shares her hateful ideology that she is wrong, that in this state, under our laws, every life is precious, every child deserves to be safe, and justice will prevail. The jury deliberated for 2 days. The waiting was agonizing for Maria, for all of us who had invested so much in seeing justice done. When they finally returned, the courtroom was silent, the air thick with anticipation. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with a kind face, stood to read the verdict. On the count of attempted murder in the second degree, we the jury find the defendant, Brenda Hoskins, guilty. A sob broke from Maria. I reached for her hand, my own heart pounding. On the count of aggravated assault, guilty. On multiple counts of violation of civil rights, guilty. Guilty on all charges. Brenda Hoskins slumped in her chair as if a physical blow had struck her, her face ashen. Marcus Thorne looked grim, defeated. A wave of relief so profound it was almost dizzying washed over me. Justice, hard-fought and desperately needed, had been served. The sentencing hearing a few weeks later was a formality, but a necessary one. The judge, echoing David Chen's sentiments, spoke of the profound betrayal of trust, the egregious abuse of power, and the deep-seated malice demonstrated by Brenda Hoskins. She was sentenced to a significant prison term, 12 years for the attempted murder, with additional concurrent sentences for the assault and civil rights violations. Her reign of petty tyranny in Harmony Creek was definitively over. Her assets were also targeted with substantial damages awarded to Maria and Leo for the trauma they had endured, and a court order mandating sweeping reforms within the Harmony Creek HOA, including mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all board members and a complete overhaul of their rulemaking process to be overseen by my office's Civil Rights Division for the next 5 years. In the aftermath, Harmony Creek began a slow, painful, but ultimately healing journey. The HOA board was completely restructured. New leaders emerged, individuals genuinely committed to creating a welcoming environment for everyone. The pool, once a symbol of division and hate, reopened with a community celebration, a unity splash day. Maria and Leo were the guests of honor. Leo, after much gentle encouragement and therapy, tentatively dipped his toes back into the water, and then with a hesitant smile, he began to splash his mother, watching with tears of joy in her eyes. He wore a new swim ring, this one bright blue, a gift from the reformed HOA. The case had a galvanizing effect far beyond Harmony Creek. It served as a stark warning to other HOAs and community groups about the legal and moral consequences of discrimination. My office received an influx of requests for guidance on inclusive practices, and we launched a statewide initiative to educate communities on civil rights and disability awareness. For me, Eleanor Vance, the state attorney general, the case was a profound reminder of why I had chosen this path. It was a reminder that justice isn't an abstract concept. It's fought for in courtrooms, in communities in the defense of the most vulnerable. It's about ensuring that no child, no individual is ever made to feel they don't belong, that their life is worth less, simply because they are different. Months later, on a warm spring evening, I found myself back at the Harmony Creek pool, not as the Attorney General, but just as Eleanor. The atmosphere was different now, lighter, more joyful. Children of all backgrounds and abilities played together. Maria was there chatting animatedly with another mother, while Leo, more confident now, was taking a swimming lesson from a patient instructor. He saw me and waved a wide, happy grin on his face. I waved back, a genuine smile spreading across my own. The scars of that terrible day would always remain for Leo, for Maria, even for the community, but they were healing, and in that healing, there was hope. There was the powerful, undeniable truth that even in the face of ugliness and hate, courage, intervention, and an unwavering commitment to justice can bring about profound change. The fight was ongoing, the work never truly done, but in moments like these, watching a child rediscover joy in a place where he had once faced terror, I knew with absolute certainty that it was a fight worth waging every single day. The echoes of that day were a testament not to the power of hate, but to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring strength found in a community that chooses inclusion over exclusion, love over fear.